So what we see is that we're going to have variations in unemployment over time. And that's not going to surprise anybody. And obviously what happens here is that recessions and the recovery coming back from recession, we have high unemployment. And in booms, the unemployment rate declines. And what we would typically see then is that over time the unemployment rate, so here's going to be our unemployment rate on this axis, this is time on this axis, it sort of goes up and down and up and down and up, and maybe it goes down, and so on and so forth. And you can see that it looks kind of like the unemployment rate is fluctuating around some long-run value. So we could think about the long-run average unemployment rate an economy experiences and it might be different for different countries. And for now, let's call this long-run average what's called the natural rate of unemployment. So you can see that somehow it looks like this economy, more or less, it tends to have an unemployment rate that's sort of coming back to this value here, say 6%. But then what happens, of course, is that sometimes unemployment is higher than its average. And this amount that unemployment is higher than its average is due to, typically, a recession. So, for instance, right now, at this time, I believe the unemployment rate is 7.1%. And the U.S. long-run average unemployment rate is about 5.5%, say. Then what we would say is that of the 7.1% we're experiencing right now, 5.5% of it is part of this natural rate of unemployment, and then 7.1% minus 5.5% equals 1.6%. This is what we call our cyclical unemployment, our unemployment that is due to the business cycle. So just to make it explicit there, cyclical unemployment is equal to actual unemployment minus the natural rate of unemployment. So that's one of the key ways we think about the variations in unemployment. We sometimes are going to go ahead and break things down a little bit further, but before we do that, let me go ahead and think about different ways of measuring unemployment. So in the last video segment, I gave a sort of quick and dirty definition of the unemployment rate. And the version I gave was what we call U3, because there are a couple of different ways of measuring the unemployment rate. And I'm not going to sort of go into them in huge depth right now, but there's a bunch of definitions of sort of various strictness. At the strictest definition of unemployment, essentially we're looking at people who are job losers, not to say that they're losers, but they lost their jobs, and they're long-term unemployed. And I believe the definition here is like 15 weeks. So these are people who are really hard up. You know, if you're thinking about the type of unemployment that's really going to change the course of your life and really, really hurt you, you had a job, you lost it, and you've been out of work for almost 4 months. So clearly that's going to be enormously painful. So this is presumably our most painful and the type of unemployment that represents the biggest problem from an overall societal point of view. U2 basically is all of our job losers, regardless of length. U3 is our conventional unemployment. And then we get into various other definitions of unemployment out there. And these start to become more and more expansive of what we include as unemployment. So that eventually, once we get down to U6, we're including people who are involuntarily underemployed, so that is, they would like to have more hours, but they can't get the number of hours they would want. And we're also including people who are what we call discouraged workers. So they essentially gave up looking for work. So they would like to have a job if they could get one at current rates, but they've given up looking for work, and thus are not part of the labor force in the normal calculation of that thing. And then what's called a marginally attached worker, which is essentially someone who would work if a job fell in their laps at a decent wage, but they're not even a discouraged worker. So there's various strictness levels of unemployment. They all tend to move together, though, so that, you know, when U3, which is our normal rate of unemployment that you hear reported on the news, goes up, all these other ones go up, and when U3 goes down, all these other ones go down too. So in some ways, while U3 might not be your preferred measure of unemployment, it is going to be true that if we watch the movements in U3, that we're also going to learn about the movements in the other unemployment rates.